It's pretty much failed. It was gonna die at any time, gonna crush whatever it fell on.
So in this video, I'm going to be making some shelves out of some bed frame material that I've got. And bed frame material is not the easiest angle to work with. It's hard. It's got a bunch of stuff welded to it and riveted to it and whatever else that you got to cut off. But it's free, and it'll work for this project, so it makes a pretty easy choice. Also, it's got these little brackets in between, and you can see that the metal is so hard that you can just sort of work harden it back and forth until the pieces break off. So that works out nice. Also, it's got these little riveted portions. I just took my slag chipping hammer and knocked all those out as well. And then once those are clean, you can flip them around in the saw. I'm just using, I believe this is a 6-inch cut-off saw, abrasive cut-off saw from Harbor Freight. And just cutting right through this stuff. It works pretty well. It's much easier to cut through something like mild steel, but you know, the saw, for as small as it is, has been quite a workhorse. For the other angles that are weird or have weird brackets that I couldn't cut off, I just use the angle grinder to cut those off, and that works just fine. I'm cutting these all on a 45, and then I'm going to put them together to make the shelves and the top and bottom of the shelf system. As you can see, I'm just cutting off those legs where the bed frame would meet the ground, just to make it a little easier to work on, and some of these are to size. And the rest you just put in the little vise here and cut them all up to size. So just using a square to mark them out, just using a soapstone pencil to make the marks and getting them all cut. And this was really the biggest process, was just getting the material to where I need it. I thought about doing sort of the coped miter, where you do the two sides that you see some people do when they're welding pieces together, but this seemed to be a little bit easier. So here I've got a long handrail that I had. It's about 16 feet long, and I figured I'd use this for the front of the shelves so I'd have a smooth surface to slide the shelves into, and you'll see as I put this together how that works. So the next step is to get this all welded together, and it was a little difficult to do, being that this doesn't really fit on my welding table, so I was sort of figuring it out moving from the welding table to the ground. I remember that I bought these sheet metal clamps a while back, and they're just the sort of little metal squares that you can hook on, and they fit perfectly on this angle and help me keep everything 90 degrees with the square, so that helped out a lot. But working on the ground was a little tough. I had to get some 2x4s to space it out so I didn't ruin the concrete. If you weld in one spot on concrete for an extended period of time, then sometimes you can develop cracks and damage the concrete, so I was trying to avoid that as well at the same time. But it was a lot of goofing around, fidgeting. If I had a fab table, it would be a real quick process. So here I'm cutting the legs, so to speak, for the sides of the shelves, and these will run from the bottom shelf to the top shelf. I'm trying to stack cut these. I was sort of pushing the saw to its limits. So I tried to stack cut 4, it wouldn't do it, but it would stack cut 2 all right. So I've got them in place, trying to hold them in place with the clamps there and make sure that everything's square 90 degrees, since that's really the most important thing about the shelf. And I just go through and I weld out a couple seams and weld out a couple seams on all 4 sides here, just making sure to double check for square. Now I've got a weld in the top shelf. Basically, I just used some clamps to keep it in place. It was held in place by friction pretty well, but clamps just to make sure it's secure. And then I just weld out a couple pieces on that joint, and I'll give you a shot here of the welds, just in case anybody wanted to see. That's what they look like out of the Harbor Freight welder. Like I said, I'm not a pro. I'm not even a novice here. I'm just winging it as I go, figuring it out. So next portion of it, I'm sort of using the shelves that I've already made as a fab table here to make the other shelves for the inside, and I'm just cutting up this hand railing. It's another piece from that same one that I was using before. And I don't quite have enough material, so I end up having to weld 2 pieces of this together to make a piece long enough, which is totally fine. This is all going to have plywood on the top of it anyway to hold everything that'll be on the shelves, so it's not like the sole support is going to be this one weld joint or anything. So I weld that all together, cut the angles on it, and then I can go ahead and put together the actual shelves. Now there'll be 2 shelves that go inside of this, and as long as I'm 90 degrees and the spacing is correct, then all should be good, and I'll be able to just slide some pieces of plywood in over the top of that, like I said, and it'll be good to go. I keep having to open the garage a little bit to let the weld fumes out, but it's working out okay. So I didn't end up having quite enough material, so I ended up having to go back and sort of take stock of what I got and weld up a couple pieces here and there, and just cut them to length. And then I make the back and the sides out of that, which isn't really that big a deal. Like I said, with the piece of plywood on it, the weight is going to be distributed enough that it's not a big deal. And these aren't holding tons of weight. They're just going to be holding some paint cans and some tools and stuff like that. So you can see I've got one on the ground already that's already been welded up. That one's ready to go in, and I was pretty impressed with the fit that I got. I didn't expect working on this little welding cart to ever do anything big, let alone do anything big that was any kind of precision. But I'm within an eighth or a 16th on all these shelves as far as fitment, so it's pretty good. And this shelf turns out a little bit different than the others simply because I didn't have enough angle. So both sides of the front and back are going to be smooth, and that's just got to be the way that it is, just because I just don't have enough material. And this is something for me in the shed. So this is me just fitting those in, and I had initially planned to measure out and drill them, but this bed frame is so hard that it was not going to be worth drilling it. I couldn't even get the couple holes drilled I needed to, so I figured I'd just measure them all out and weld them all out where I needed them, and that'll work out just fine. They're all sort of welded at a specific distance, so I have the shelves spaced where I needed them, but I don't ever plan on really putting anything else on it or even moving this anywhere else. If I ever needed to, I could always make some adjustments, or they'd still fit whatever I needed to fit, so I'm not too worried about it. And it's sort of just a project to get me welding, so I go through and I just weld all these all the joints out, and it's probably unnecessary, it's probably overkill. I probably don't need to weld all of these joints out, but it sort of gets me working in different angles and figuring out what the welder likes and doesn't like, and the gun, and all that good stuff that comes along with welding that I don't know yet, that I'm just trying to figure out. So I'm sure there's a lot of tips that people have out there, and I'm sure there are things that I'm missing that I probably could have thought of or done differently, but for a first project, this is going pretty good for me, actually.
So I pulled some stuff out of my shed here, out of my storage shed, and you can see that this thing is leaning real hard, and it's about to go at any moment. So I got to clean off these shelves. I'm going to repurpose these on the new shelf system. Put this guy in there, put it back, and I think we'll be good to go. Alright, so I got all the stuff out of the old one, and as you can see, it's not too sturdy. It's pretty much failed. It was gonna die at any time, gonna crush whatever it fell on. So I've got the other one ready to go. Got to take these shelves off and then put them on the other one, and I think we'll be set. So the plywood from the original shelf, they were actually just scraps, so they wouldn't fit in the new one. So I had to run to the hardware store in the middle of the rain out here and get some more pieces. And this old shelf functioned as a pretty good sawhorse in the rain. The rain's let up a little bit now, but the shelf looks good. Shelf looks pretty good. So let's see if we can get it installed, get all the stuff back on it, get all my tools and stuff out from underneath this tarp, or these tarps, and I think we'll be done. So there we go. I've got it all installed, set up here. Much better than the old one. This will hold much better weight, much better organization, and a couple benefits I get from using this is I get this ledge here, and this ledge wraps around the entire back of the shelf. So being that this shed, if you hadn't noticed, is one of those metal sheds, which are pretty, the metal's pretty flimsy. It's sort of cheap. It can dent easy. And what'll happen is if you got shelves in here, you'll push something to the back of the shelf, or inevitably it'll get pushed up against the edge, and it'll sort of flex this ribbing or dent the ribbing. As you can see, like, that's what happened on this corner here. Something got pushed up against it, either from the outside, that's probably from the outside, that's probably from the inside, that's probably from the inside, and it'll cause bulges. But this, since I have that ridge around there, there's a lot less chance of me pushing something back beyond the edge of the shelf and hitting the ridges in the shed. So that's awesome in that way. I think it'll work out really good for me. I wanted to paint it and everything, and it's got a little rust on it because it sat outside and it happened to rain in the morning. It's been raining here for the last couple days, but I think it'll work out really well. This is my first big build of this sort. I've never done anything over the size of the welding cart up to date, so this will be the biggest thing. And so some of the welds turned out good, some of them turned out not so good. But it's all a learning process, you know. I get to sort of experiment and try different settings on the machine and different angles, and holding the gun different angles and a lot of different things. And I think it'll hold up just fine for what I'm used to, and it'll give me some good practice in welding for future projects, and maybe some fabrication for something a little more visually appealing. But that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm just a guy with a welder who's learning. So until the next video, you guys have a good one.